What's up, guys? This is Corey with the Dirt City Gym, back in another video for y'all. So today we are taking a look at the ARG Invitational, which is this coming weekend. It's the first real big tournament in this format. We're going to be in this format really for a little while now. Set 7 doesn't release until August, so this is our format for the time being. So as always, whenever I do these videos, I like to provide lists that I think are going to be doing well, lists that either you could be looking at playing or lists that you should be expecting to play against. Now, as always, these lists are more skeletons than they are the actual definitive list that I'm saying you should prepare for card, but it gives you a pretty good idea of kind of what to expect. I base this a lot of what I've been testing, what I've been seeing, and everything like that. As always, not all of these include sideboards, some of them do. The list that I'm playing with regularly do have sideboards versus the ones that I don't have sideboards. We're going to go over 7 lists that I think are going to do well, and then I've got some honorable mentions as well. I suppose I could have done all the honorable mentions in the list, but we're just sticking with how it is right now. Before we get into that, though, I do actually want to go into sideboard. Kind of want to do a general primer of what you should be including in sideboards. This is, I think, a conversation that's not super well talked about, so let's go ahead and get into that first of all. So we've got these 6 cards here. These are cards that I think if you have access to, you should either be playing these, some of these specifically main deck, or having access to these in the side. So we'll kind of go over these right quick. So first up, we've got the Sun Goku. This is in close quarters. This is the Goku from the anniversary box. So it's a 2-drop. It combos for 2. And then it basically says if you have a multicolored card in your energy, choose one of your opponent's cards with energy cost of 3 or less, ignoring barrier, and KO it. So this is our really hard, just pure path to greatness counter. If you're running multicolored cards, I feel like you need access to this card. This, like I said, specifically path to greatness is what this targets, and that's a deck you need to prepare for. So if you have access to multicolor, you should be playing this. Next up, we got Mutatio, whatever you want to call it. This is, just going to go ahead and say it, probably going to be one of the more influential cards, I think, this weekend, and in large part to who has it and who doesn't. I think the people who have it could have the ability to do really well. And it's kind of limited in quantity right now, and that's potentially problematic for a lot of people, but if you have it, I definitely think you should potentially look at playing it. If it's not already in your main deck, at least include it in your sideboard. It's one of the best cards in the game right now. It answers a lot. It's almost effectively a Bloodlust type effect for decks that don't have access to that, whether you're not a Frieza's Army. As long as you can splash yellow, you can have access to this card. Next up is Tien Shinhan Churning Fire. I definitely think this is pretty much a staple by now in sideboards, but Janemba and blue-type decks are just around everywhere, and having access to this is just kind of important. Next up is Mercenary Tau, Ruthless Trainer. If you've been watching any of my videos the last couple months, I'm relentless. Respect discard. I'm not saying discard's going to dominate a format or dominate an event or anything like that, but when people don't respect it, by including something like a Mercenary Tau on their sideboard, that's when discard does well, and that's when discard does very well. That's when you see things like the Black Broly or the Lord Slugs and everything like that like do well at these events. It's because people don't respect it, and I think you are doing yourself a huge disservice not respecting discard. I would definitely include Mercenary Tau. I almost feel like Mercenary Tau in a sideboard is more important than a Tien Shinhan or Churning Fire. Next up, we've got Time Control Cronoa. Again, this has been a staple pretty much ever since it's been released in the sideboard, but this weekend especially, don't forget it. Make sure it's there. And then finally, Minus Killy Zone. Another one that's been a staple here and there in sideboards, but with so much counterplay cards coming into play, whether it's this Mutatio that we just talked about, whether it's called Bloodlust, Preemptive Strike, Crusher Ball, anything like that, I think this card is more important right now than it's ever been, just because there are so many counterplay effects right now that you need to worry about. So on all, guys, like I said, this is just kind of a little primer for sideboarding, and I would definitely recommend making sure you have access to these. Let's move on, and next thing I want to talk about is archetypes. So I've got 2 archetypes right here listed up. I'm not providing a lot of deck lists for these, but I do think these will have an impact this weekend. The reason I'm not going over several deck lists is because there's a lot of different options of way you can play it. When we go into UI, you've got things like Dende UI, you've got Broly UI, you've got all sorts of random blue things that can shove a UI package in it, thanks to the Path to Greatness promo that we got in the anniversary box. I would definitely respect UI. I think it's something to worry about. I don't know that it will necessarily do well this weekend, but I would definitely be prepared to see various UI.decks. And then moving on to that, we got Unending Destruction, Android 13. I think he kind of fits in the same category. There's a lot of different variations on ways that you can play this. Right now, we've got at least 2 leaders that he's going to see a lot of play in, potentially more. We're looking at Super 17. It's probably the best leader for him. You've got people that are going to play Android 13 leader. You've got people who are going to play old school 17 and 18 leader, and potentially even Cell leader. So I think he's definitely a card or an archetype in general that we'll see play. It's just not fair to try to include him in an honorable mention or anything like that because there's so many different ways to play him. But anyway, guys, that is it. Those are just my brief rundown of stuff before we actually get in the list. So let's go ahead and get into our honorable mentions. Alright, so first up, maybe potentially controversial, but I have Toa listed in our honorable mention. I'm not sold on Toa. I'm more accepting of Toa than I was when she was officially revealed. I just don't know that she does enough. And does enough well to really just kind of dominate a format. I'm not a fan of not drawing on the backside of a leader, and I think that's always just going to be a hindrance. I think better players can find ways to take advantage of those type situations, and it's just something I don't see panning it out. I think she'll be played. She'll probably be played quite a bit because people are really just like infatuated with the leader, especially because it's new. Everyone likes to play the new stuff, but I just don't see it doing well. I could see one potentially sneaking into whatever the top cut ends up being, if that's a top 16. I don't see it sneaking into a top 8. If we get a top 32, then absolutely there'll probably be at least 1 or 2 that sneak into that. But we'll kind of see depending on how many people show up at the event. But really what Toa's doing is it's playing a lot of black cards. It's trying to go up the mirror chain, get out the big mirror, make you discard cards, give it crit, swing big double strike crit. And then on the leader, it's getting rid of double strikes and things like that. It's able to technically flip early. I'm not a fan of that effect of it either. Defensively, if you don't have the 10 cards in your warp, you don't have a way to flip. And I'm not a fan of that either. I think that's also something that really inhibits it. Yes, technically, it is pretty easy to get 10 cards in the warp, but that's one of those things that's not guaranteed. I can guarantee I go down to life. I can guarantee things like that to guarantee that I flip, but something like this where you need a specific amount of cards in the warp, especially ones that you can't interact with defensively, like you can't put cards in your warp on defense. I'm just not super a fan of that. But anyway, I do think you should respect Toa to the point, like I said, people will play it, and if you're not prepared for it, it'll do well. So let's move on. Next up, we've got Oob. So this benefits from the anniversary box, anniversary box power promos. There's a couple different variations of lists running around. Typically mono blue is what you're going to see. There are some variations that are blue-yellow that are running the Mutashio like we talked about, and it gives it access to like battering. Generally, it's like just swapping up the super combos for the yellow World Martial Arts Tournament super combos. But really what Oob is trying to do, it's trying to get into the Videl, the Grandpa Gohan, or the Grandpa Hercule, into the Pan combo to draw a bunch of cards, make Pan a big double striker, dual attack. And you kind of swing in, and then it has access to the UI package in the back end, which can kind of close out games itself. Overall, I think that it is strong. I don't know if it does enough. I don't think Oob itself is just a fantastic leader, and the engine is kind of hampered because it has to play with Oob. There's not another way to really do the Pan, Hercule, Videl stuff outside of a blue World Martial Arts Tournament leader, so we're kind of stuck right there. I do think it'll be played, I just don't know how well it'll end up doing for the event. Next up for our honorable mentions, we have a Announcer, another beneficiary of the World Martial Arts Tournament. Really, I think the go-to strategy for Announcer at the moment is the Babidi Vegeta Goku engine. This has, if you're running Objection, you have access to get this out like on turn 3 to get 2 triple strikers. They can't be KO'd, they get really big really quick. You've got Dende, the Astute Savior, that lets you get the Bobbity out early, make sure it's guaranteed in your hand. And then you ramp up with Objection. You've got the Roshi and Shin that draws just a ass ton of cards. You've got Goku Oob, which can control board. A lot of really good options. Announcer just has great options in and of himself because he can just draw whenever you play a battle card. You've got a negate whenever you play it. You draw a card. Really cool stuff. Announcer's always been one of those really kind of fringe decks, but it benefited a lot from the power boosters. Finally, in our honorable mention list, we've got the Mass Saiyan. If you've paid attention, I recently posted a video on this list actually specifically. I know there are several different variations of the list that are floating around. Some that are including the Mass Saiyan, the Beguiled Warrior, to bring out the Time Trauma Mass Saiyan, Awaken Quickly, and all that kind of stuff. I do think it is worth mentioning because I do think it has the potential to do well. It's one of those decks that if things kind of go in its favor, it can really just dominate. If it starts hitting double strike crits super early from the get-go with the leader, you're looking at 25 to 30k double strike crits early that are really hard to deal with. It gets very oppressive, and sometimes there's just not a lot you can do if it just hits so hot. So if the deck hits hot, it can do well. Obviously, depending on the deck it's playing against, we're talking about specifically things like Janemba, things can sometimes just kind of get out of hand and all of its card advantage is gone. Obviously, it gets a real boon with the Vegeta the Time Regulator, which lets it draw additional cards, and it lets it cycle cards back into the deck, which is really good. Particularly like the super combos, you can cycle those, which is really strong. So I do think Mass Saiyan, like I said, this is the last one I have on my honorable mention because I think this is the one that has the potential to probably do the best. Just because it is such an aggro strategy, and right now aggro is in a really good spot. So now we're going to go ahead and get into our top 7. Alright, so first up in our top 7, I have Zamasu. This is probably a little bit more wishful thinking than it is actual what might do well, but I love the Zamasu stuff. The support I got from the anniversary box is fantastic. I think it has an incredibly strong engine that was included. And all in all, I love the leader in general. It's always been one of my favorite leaders just because I feel like it does such interesting things. So basically what you're trying to do is just have like a wall of defense on your leader side, on Awakened leader side. Instead of taking life, you mill cards. And then with the anniversary box, we got our new 4-drop Zamasu that if you have 15 cards or less in your deck, you can pay 2 and then play the 10-drop Zamasu from your hand, which is incredibly strong. It's one of the strongest card effects in the game. Whenever it swings, it takes a life, takes an energy, takes a card, takes a battle card, and then spins them at the bottom of the deck. Just incredibly strong. Like if you get your opponent down to 1 life, you just win whenever this hits the field, unless it's bloodlusted. So one of the strongest effects in the game. Our extra card that we got from the anniversary box is just another great card for this deck defensively. Also lets you ramp other options that we get from ramping. You get access to Gogeta Hero Revive relatively quickly, getting to 7 energy, which that can just win a game by itself. And then you get the Goku Oob SCR, which is another effect just like the Zamasu, except this has dual attack. So this can get it twice. So if you get someone down to 2 life, excuse me, he can just win games by itself, negate or whatever. I do think this is potentially a very strong, if people don't know how to play against it or they just can't get past the wall, it has that Janemba effect of being able to just build a wall with super combos and all sorts of defense and things like that. So I do think this is a really good option for this weekend just because people necessarily won't be prepared for it. And it has relatively good matchups across the board. Alright, next up we've got our red-blue Hirudegarn. Hirudegarn's always just kind of in the back, it's always been hanging out. I think it's kind of taking the place of Pan at the moment in terms of Chain Zeno engines, just because it has access to really good blue cards. And then just in combination of red cards with the hero, it's always just done really well. It's just a really strong, like I said, Chain Zeno is one of the best engines in the game. There's a lot of things in the format right now that this really just kind of fixes. It's really great versus Victory Strike, it's really great versus Janemba, it's really great versus Kid Ku, it's really good versus Broly. All that stuff together, this deck just really can do well with. So we'll see. I know it's been popping up a little bit in these preliminaries and things like this. I think it has the potential to do really well this weekend. Getting into our top 5, we've got Yellow Dende Frieza. I know some people call it Trader Frieza, whatever you prefer. I think just at the top level, this is probably the most skillful deck in the format. This has the potential to beat anything just based on you have access to unlimited hand knowledge. You play the Planetary Mecha Frieza on 2, or you play it for free with the leader ability. You see your opponent's hand, and then you're able to plan ahead what the next couple turns are going to look like, what the current turns are going to end up looking like, and things like that. And that's both a good and a bad thing. Having access to this lets you kind of prepare, but if you plan poorly and choose the wrong card, this deck can get cracked back on really easy. It doesn't have several great options defensively, just because a lot of its combo cards are 1/10Ks, as opposed to like 0/5Ks and stuff like that. And if you get caught with like awkward life and stuff like that, it gets to kind of awkward situations. I do think the deck is incredibly strong. If someone plays this that's a very good pilot, I definitely expect this to do well. I don't know if it ultimately has the gas to win an event right now, but I definitely think it has the potential to just kind of sweep through variants in the Swiss. Moving into our top 4. Top 4 really has not changed. Honestly, I'll put it this way: the top 4 is pretty interchangeable, to be honest with you. Any of these top 4 could go to 1, any of these top 4 could go to 4th, or any kind of combination of there. It really just depends on how the event goes and how they play and everything like that. Right now for number 4, we've got our Kid Goku. Right now we're looking at a yellow Kid Goku package. I think that's for right now. I think it's probably a better version of it. It gets access to some better cards. It did get access to a couple cards that are beneficial to it from the anniversary box. This 2-drop Goku blocker that whenever it's KO'd, you play a 3-drop yellow Kid Goku from your hand, is a really, really good engine for the deck. It's also Kid Goku, so whenever this is killed, Android 8 pops, so you can pop something with this, and then whenever he gets killed, you play the explosive and pop something, so you can get rid of 2 battle cards, which is really, really strong. Access to Demeter is really, really good, and this deck can just kind of take over games. You notice we are including Training Buddy Krillin. I think this is a card you really need access to. Before, it hasn't seen a lot of play with, like, initially the lists or running Training Buddy Krillin, and then they kind of got away from it. I think right now, just because of the prevalence of things like Crisis Crusher, Training Buddy Krillin is the way to go. Another little side note that we'll include here in the side deck: I don't have a full side deck, but I do have 3 of these Zarbons back from set 1. If you don't know, which I think for the most part the knowledge is out there now, this is a fantastic card, especially in the sideboard, especially for things like Victory Strike. So whenever they go to the Hide the Mastery, they tap all of your stuff down. If you've got the Kid Goku and Android 8, they'll just tap them down so you can't combo. And so what you do is you side this in and you combo Zarbon whenever they swing the Victory Strike. You untap the Kid Goku and then you combo the Kid Goku away, and then Android 8 triggers and you can kill the Victory Strike. An incredibly strong, little cheeky kind of strategy that, like I said, I think it's pretty much out there now, but if not, now you know. This is a great, great, great tech option for Victory Strike. Yellow also gives it the option to run Mutashio, which, like I said, I think is going to be one of the more influential cards this weekend. And definitely something that if you run yellow, you need access to. But anyway, let's move on. Alright, now we have our green-yellow Broly. Pretty much nothing's really changed with this list. It's pretty much the standard green-yellow Broly that we've been seeing really since inception. Green-yellow is the best way to go, as opposed to mono-green. You get access to Bloodlust and Frieza's Call. You can go up the chain. It has a really good inherent Victory Strike matchup, just because it's hard to deal with the Brolys and everything like that. It does. The only issue I have putting Broly at number 1, I know it won the most recent big event, is that you don't see a lot of these sneak into top 8 or top cut. Generally speaking, there may be one that makes it, and just depending on how it goes, kind of depends on how the tournament goes. If more people are playing it, then it'll have more options to get there, but generally speaking, you just don't see a lot of them make it. It kind of sometimes loses to the field, and then random stuff that it just runs into that it can't do well with, or it gets clunky, or this, that, or another. But for whatever reason, Broly, whenever it gets there, it does well. It just struggles sometimes getting there. Into our number 2, we have Janemba. Alright, so I'm making the call this weekend, and I'm totally ready to be wrong about this, that yellow-blue Janemba is the call for this weekend, particularly because of Mutashio. Like we talked about before, this card is incredibly powerful, and it kind of helps shore up the Victory Strike matchup that we struggled with prior. The other thing about this is it gets access to Goku in close quarters, which again we talked about earlier, which also helps shore up that Victory Strike matchup. That's all we're really trying to do. Mono Blue Janemba doesn't get access to these two cards, and that's why I think running a Yellow Blue Janemba is probably beneficial for you this weekend. I'm not saying that that's going to be the case moving forward after this weekend, but I think this weekend in particular, it's a really great call. Janemba by itself can just win matchups, so the yellow isn't super negative for you. It is a little bit less consistent than your standard mono blue Janemba, but I think the benefits of what we gained from the anniversary box and the power boosters really just kind of makes it a boon, like I said, for this weekend specifically. And finally, we've still got the big monster Victory Strike, Broly Hide Master Victory Strike. I think moving forward right now with Mutashio, this is the way to play Victory Strike, just because if you sequence correctly and you save your Awakening until your Victory Strike turn, you can still get past Mutashio, because whenever Victory Strike evolves in a Height of Mastery, it loses the tag of where it can't untap. So you still have your leader ability where you can take a life and then untap the Victory Strike and then go into it. Obviously that's not the most ideal situation. You want to save your untap effect so you can swing twice with the Victory Strike, but like I said, it's not, if they're playing Mutashio, you can't really get around that. So you do have to play it a little bit differently. You have to be, dare I say, a little bit more defensive than you might have been before, where you want to save that Awakening into your Victory Strike turn. So I think that's makes Sugesh even more important for the deck, so you can Sugesh path out for free, so you don't have to tap out on turn 3. Obviously you still have to play around Konoha and things like that. Another option for this is the swap engine, which may end up being more effective. This is just the list that I already have built for it. The swap engine lets you still have an energy open if you go into path on 3 by swapping up from the Gohan or the Goku into path. So that may be the better route to go, but I think Victory Strike is just so oppressive as it is, and for the most part I think Mutashio is going to be limited. I don't know that a ton of people are going to have access to it. Obviously the top players and stuff like that will have access to it, they'll already have it, but there's going to be so many decks that just won't be able to play it just because they don't have it, and because of that I still think it's going to dominate. So we'll kind of see how it goes. Like I said, this is still my pick as the top deck until it gets dethroned. Obviously, like I said, Broly can still beat it. Starter Broly still has a really great matchup for it. But I think if played correctly, I think Hide Master Broly still has the advantage. But anyway, guys, that is it. That is my top 7 honorable mentions, sideboards, all that kind of good stuff. Looking forward to see how the event goes, and then we'll come back next week once we get deck list, hopefully, and we'll break it down and see how everything went and how we did. But that's it, and we will see y'all next time.